So let's take a look here. All right, cool. So yeah, we had a little bit of a rest day yesterday. Now we didn't ramp into the close after the Fed minutes came out. Nothing crazy, like we probably popped like 1% or so. But in essence, it still keeps this rounding pattern, intact. I apologize for the net. I'm still in the hotel. We're gonna have to see. We got a light open. We'll have to see how yesterday's highs, kind of hold. We did, kind of wick out a little bit for a hot second, but I think that was a misprint there. You see, we didn't really close. We closed like kind of over here. So we still got room into the 50-day moving average, and I think that's going to be really the big spot here because you can see that's where the last decline started, right at this 50-day moving average. See how we were kind of like ripping and riding here at the 50, and then we just kerplunked, and so we're kind of in this weird spot in the markets where like everybody already knows everything, right? Like we've been going over the same news for, 6 months now. And so, that's already kind of out of the way. And so now we're starting to see a little bit more, I would say, constructive price action than we have been. And I think that's going to be really important as we get into this is like, if we have constructive price action, we see stocks building really big bases, then I think we're going to be able to have some fun. Now, the action has been choppy. Yesterday was, what is the word for yesterday? Debilitating. And the chop was debilitating, demoralizing. It really, it took a lot out of you, this part over here. And then there was a lot of fugazis yesterday. I think that's part of it was just waiting for the Fed minutes, but that action has been the norm after big trend days. Anytime we've had a big trend day of recent, we've not really had big follow through days, and then we've ended up having rest days, and then the third day ends up being something with a little bit more volatility. I think the term yesterday would have been emasculating, maybe. That was probably the proper terminology. Emasculating would have been the what. Let's take a look at the earnings, please. And guys, better market conditions. The market conditions are fine. Like, we're not in a trending environment right now. So there's times to like really make your money, right? Which is trending environments. Like if you have something like this here, this is a trending environment, right? If you have something like this, is a trending environment, or if you have something right like this, it's a trending environment. So now, like, if you really think about it, since like, let's just call this like the middle of May, right? This is like May 15th. We're at the same price as we were, right, in May 15th. So now we're at July 15th. So we are essentially like in a big range. As you guys know, like range is the worst part in trading, right? That's the penis in between us, right? That's the sitting in the back seat of your buddy's Volkswagen Beetle, right? In the middle, not fun. So that's where we're getting this action. I think this 50-day moving average will be a nice tell if we can get over it. Now that's a big what if, like, the odds of this bear market just being over like randomly is probably minimal. Almost all bull markets, at least of recent, if you're thinking about, let's say, since, 20, 30 years or whatever, since, most of us have been following the markets, almost all bull markets have started with a Fed pivot, I would think is the proper terminology. Fed pivot essentially means like, right, the influx of liquidity being put back in the system through, right, money printing, bond buying, stock purchases, whatever they actually do. There's almost always been a Fed pivot that starts it. So, that'll be something in the back of my mind too. We've really not seen, at least in my lifetime, a bull market start out of just the blue. It's usually always started with the Fed pivot, right? Like the coronavirus crash, the Fed came in hot. 2008, the Fed came in hot, right? And they start pumping that liquidity in, and so we'll see, with the price of oil and gas falling so much too, like, at least some of the inflationary pressures that people have been really complaining about or talking about. I've only had to fill gas once in the last few months, so like I just noticed it. But this is, we've come down quite a bit already. So, maybe this will help some of that inflationary pressure too, right? Natural gas is down almost 50%. Oil is down quite a bit. And then you see like, even like, right, like steel, right? Like all these steel companies and steel, aluminum, so if you're really thinking about like, if you're thinking about, let's go like 30 days out, And if you're looking at like, right, natural gas down 30%, this is steel, like look at the right drop in steel from, I mean, that's, fuck, we really should have been more aggressively probably shorting some of these things, but there's not that many good, there's not good enough range on a lot of these things. This is the metals in mining. So this is down, right, quite a bit. You can see 30-day marks or even more, right? So you have really like, this is the gold miners. The only thing that's held up a little bit is this, is this gasoline fund, but even that's down quite a bit from its highs. So that's where you're starting to see, right? Like you're starting to see all this kind of nastiness come in, like agriculture, so there's really been nowhere to hide in a lot of these names. So that's something to just kind of keep in the mind here, is that maybe that inflationary pressure is gone and we'll have some of this, we'll have a little respite from the endless, bad news that's been really coming out of recent. Let's take a look at the gappers, and then we can come in and play after. United Maritime Corporation. So this is probably something that I personally, obviously would stay away from, but this is something that, frankly, it could be played if you really want to. I mean, this is like small caps have been heating up. Like you can totally get into those. Not my particular flavor, but you know how it goes. Hey, this Faraday Electric had a very, very narrow range day yesterday. And so usually what happens is like when you get one of these little guys with the narrow range day, the next day it can actually get hot. Like this is something, now this is a little bit different than a normal small cap. Like this is probably moves a little bit more steady. That is something, so you got an inside day. That could actually be something that you could play. Like if you have the liquidity stay, like you can add something like that in. Yes, like this is pretty nice too. So this is a biotech, but this one's right under the 200-day moving average. This is one of those ones like, see, your float's only 5 million shares. You got like a big rounding pattern. If the liquidity actually stays in on something like this, then that's something that you can play too. Tenneco, I actually thought this was a buyout. It's like it's still moving around here. I thought this was a buyout for some reason. Maybe it's getting unbought out. Not sure. This is boiled, the natural gas, but you can see this is like a broken chart. Man, that's nice, right? But this is a broken chart at this point, and it has no liquidity. Veru, yeah, keep an eye on the Veru. So Veru had a big pop yesterday, that it came back and just rested, and now you're kind of gapping back into this trend line resistancy thing. You do have like 1 test, 2 tests, 3 tests, 4 tests, 4 tests of the resistance spot there. That could actually get going. Like if you start to see, right, like this thing start to like push through these levels, that could actually be, that could hold. Like, that's, you've got more than enough base. And then you can see back here, like this thing was $24. So that could actually hold, not my particular flavor, but also this is much easier to trade than your normal small cap. Like you can see here, it moves fairly linear for the most part. You can definitely roll with that. There's a UNG jump. So you see a little bounce in metals today, not much. Okay, so GME announced a stock split. Sometimes these things, like when they announce the stock splits, they actually get going. I don't know why these are red candles over here, but this could actually this might get a little bit of play. You've had a big base over here. Now, post stock split, they'll probably dump off, but we have seen in the past, like when you have the announcement, they start to run for 3, 4, 5 days. These people are like, I don't know why. It doesn't really make any sense, but they do it. They push it. That could be something. I'd actually check in on this a little bit later. See if it's the Jimmy. Almost always you pop in then like a big rounding base, and then it tends to go off. I'd put that on the watch list for now. Spaceball, range. See this XPEP? Like I like the location of this. Like you have like this big nice push to the 200-day moving average. and then like easy, happy-go-lucky pullback into 20 SMA. This is like a pure momentum setup though. We haven't seen this type of setup in a while where you pull back into 20 and you kind of remount back over the nines and you end up with this like kind of hook and ladder over here. This ends up being a really nice play, where you can kind of get this thing back up here really quickly. I think that and right, LI look really good. Does LI need another day to fill out? I don't know. Like sometimes what happens is when you look at it, say like it busts through here. After it busts through, that nine starts to like kind of creep up right away anyways, and it makes it look a little bit different. This could actually, like, I think both of these, they could do a little bit of a ripstick fairly quickly. Like I would keep an eye on both of these. I think that we could probably play these at the open between this and the XPEV Nation. I like the location on this one slightly better, but the other one has a lot more momentum, but this one's got more of a gap. See this one, like I just like the location on this because you're like pretty close to yesterday's high. So like, if you can kind of congeal up here at the open, like you do a little pull and go or a show and go, or even a little ORB, like that ends up being a good spot. LA is not up as much. So, this maybe has a little bit more room to go. We'll have to keep an eye on both of these. I think both of those will suffice for what we're trying to do. You see the rest of these are kind of holding up. Like if Future had a fucking nasty day yesterday. I don't really know what to make of like the big dump off in these yesterday. I didn't see any news in specific on PDD, but it did seem like an overly aggressive dump compared to, right, it took 3 days to ramp up to $7 and then it just dumped off in an hour. That's not really like an orderly, it's not an orderly pullback. And then you did have like an increase in right selling that compared to its previous days, even it was the highest volume days probably a month. So that's something to kind of keep in mind of, like, right, Baba dumped off and then it rebounded back into the close. So I do think that part is bullish, like this thing rebounded off. So it might have been PDD specific. And Baba has been oddly ramping into the close the last few days. So if you look here, this particular day, the 4th, it ramped into the close, then it gapped down, and then it ramped into the close. And then see how like it gapped down, and then right, it started to ramp into the close. So we have multiple days of it chopping around at the open and then ramping into the close. So something to just keep mind of too, like when you're looking at your patterns or trying to do something, like think about the trajectory of how like certain stocks have been acting. This one has been getting bought up into the close every day. So that's, an indication of bullishness, but also, know if you're trying to trade it, that it has been acting very choppy in the morning. And so if you're going to take a play in it, make sure it's really, really good. Otherwise, you're probably going to get, chopped around till the close. That's what's at least been happening of recent. So that'll be something to kind of just keep in mind of. I'm not really sure what to make of PDD. I think Rivian's probably got a little bit more juice too. Watch how it reacts around yesterday's highs. I think that'll be good. Now, CVNA did have a rest day. I think this is just, maybe this was a short squeeze. Who knows what it was? There was some news out 2 days ago. That's a classic rest day. I think we gotta roll with it. And then coin was also a classic, rest day. It won't show up on the inside day scan because it peeked its head out above the previous day's high for a hot second, but then it kind of marinated around. I feel like the levels are a little bit easier to recognize on CVNA, right? Because you have like something just a little, the box is a little bit more tighter and a little bit more, right, easy to place, at least in the daily too, because you have like this kind of right support underneath. Where on coin, you had the inside day, but you're like under, right, the 20 SMA, and then you're also like still like $5 or $6 or $4 or whatever the fucking math is, but right away from the previous day's high. So you're like 10% to, it's going to take an 8, 9, 10% bounce just to get it here, Armando. You still have room to go, but right, the location of actually getting it to do an explosive like trend type of play is a little bit different than right on the CVNA where you just have like a pure inside day. Take a look. Yeah, a firm, I would count that as an inside day actually also. Um, Even though it did kind of peek its head out for a hot second, you know, it was theoretically above the previous days. I'd still consider it a narrow range day. This is like what we call like a makeshift day, a makeshift one, but it's still got the juice. Yeah, that's not my fave. I think probably SE, it looks a little bit better in terms of like locations of them. So like I'd rather have something like this. Like I think that's probably right, 6 windows worthy. Um, 6 windows worthy. These are pretty good. I keep both Veru and FFIE. LI is good. I think Snow is probably going to be a daily trader for a little bit. It's just got that look where it can still kind of keep going. We got CVNA definitely. And then, theoretically Peloton had an inside day too. I think we want to kind of be into some of these ones that are a little bit beaten down. Let's take a look at Meta. So yeah, GME, we keep LI, CVNA, XPEV. Want to keep a couple of these Chinas, right? XPEV's got a nice location. That 32.25 will be a trigger spot. And then, Baba's like resting right under this 200-day moving average. Yeah, let's keep this one on. I think we're good. Let's look on the downside to see if we got anything. If we got any PRs that are just nasty that we could throw down on. I feel like this ICPT is too liquid. Chunk. See, these are all just inverse ETFs. I don't think there's anything to do with Rev either. Nothing on the downside. Hey, so Samsung had some good news out too. So I think these chips are going to be strong out of the gate. So you got right AMD, NVIDIA. The locations of these are real fucking tricky because they're running right into the 9 EMAs. But like whatever the Samsung news was it came out good. So you're going to see a run in some of these, right? Like see this MU's had a really nice reversal last couple of days, and the really nice, couple days, and it's at the 20 SMA. So I think we keep an eye on the chips. It'll need a pull at the open, ideally, and then maybe a show and go. We are, so the market is in range, like just because, but things are cheap. So like, we want to catch the big rip, but that's just not how it works. Like, because we didn't have like a big capitulation kind of crash, right? Like we're not going to have like necessarily a V-shaped bounce. V-shaped bounces are much more rare anyways. But like, we didn't have that kind of capitulation crash, nasty, right? Like we did like in the Corona days. Like this was like, right. See like how big the down days were. And obviously we dropped like 50, 60% in a matter of like a couple of weeks. So that's like a little bit different than what we have this year, which is right, a much slower, orderly bleed of just right, like lower highs, lower highs, lower highs. And these are still, we're still in a series of actually lower highs. we're not necessarily out of like any kind of woods here. Like we're still right, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high. So, that'll be something that we should all, be mindful of too. So we didn't have that kind of capitulation. We've had a slower bleed. So, these are things that, we have to take account that we could just be stuck in a range for a little bit. We do have earnings season coming up with Alcoa earnings usually kick it off. So that's in 2 weeks, bide your time. There's going to be times where there'll be more PR plays that are kind of going to move around regardless of what's happening with the market than there's going to be right now, which is, we're kind of just news dependent, but really we're not even news dependent. The news is already known. Like we're just like fucking chopping around a little bit. We've been in basically a 2-month range. All right, so let's get back into this. We want to be long on these chips, right? On the Samsung news. So that's the AMD, NVIDIA's, those are daily traders for us anyways. We have a couple of these Chinas that look good, right? You have LI, you have XPEV, you have BABA, right? These are like kind of nuzzled at certain levels. We have the third bucket, these little guys, right? So you get your Veru, your FFIE, and then we have the two inside, we have our inside day plays, right? Which is your CVNA, your Peloton, and your Coinbase. That's the list. We're sticking to it. Hey, a couple of these solars may push off at some point too. I'm actually very surprised with the rising gas prices that the EV, I guess we're in bear market, but back if this was like a year and a half ago, gas prices getting so crazy, every single EV company in the world would be up 200% every couple of days, right? Yeah, so you see this ENPA just got a little bit of a low, but it just trades liquid, so I probably stay away from that bad boy. I think that's the list. Let's narrow this bad boy out. I think ST2, your CVNA, you get your AMD, NVIDIA. You can, fuck around with the Meta too. Oh. You can fuck around with Meta too. You got a little bit of a level here. And it may kind of peek its head over. So that looks pretty good too. I definitely, let's see what happens with this kind of some of these inside days like Peloton. Set an alert on the Peloton too. Like what you can do is, starts to peek its head. Like let's say yesterday's high is 1063. Like you can set an alert at let's say, right, 1040 or something. Like, so if it starts to peek its head, you can go and do a little dicker and deal, and it's already, right? It's already picking up a little stain. Then we'd be good to go. So guys, trade well, trade fast. You know the drill. Let's try to have some fun today.